Welcome to Palo Alto, California. Population 66,642. Twelve elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 2 public high schools, nestled in the information hub that is Silicon Valley, the city is a crossroads of startups, think tanks, and rising stars. Our streets are lined with million-dollar homes, and luxury vehicles regularly cruise its roads. In the distance, Hoover Tower rises from the campus of Stanford University, a constant reminder of the intellectual atmosphere that has made Palo Alto a nationally recognized symbol of success in the 21st century. The town seems to be a bustling hive of achievement and contentment. However, what lies on the outside may actually be a mask, concealing a problem desperately in need of a solution.
It's all so heavy, so overwhelmingly heavy that I can't even think straight anymore, and everything is seconds away from toppling over. After a certain point, the weight has no longer any effect. It's not greater or worse one day than it is another, it's just heavy.
Something very troubling is happening in Northern California. Over the past 6 months in the city of Palo Alto, 4 teenagers have taken their lives, all throwing themselves in front of commuter trains.
Well, Ken, it isn't an easy thing to talk about for students, for parents, or for teachers.
Ways to stop it has been going on since the first suicide in May.
But when the string of tragedies in Palo Alto sparked local news coverage, there was criticism that the reporting could bring more copycat deaths.
But tonight, students tell us there's a dark side and something's got to give.
Since 2009, suicide has been an enigma in Palo Alto, as 16 high school students and graduates from the community have taken their own lives.
I graduated from Pali in 2009, which was when the previous suicide cluster was, and I knew one of the girls who died. The first time I remember hearing about teen suicides was in 8th grade, and since then I'd been thinking, this is a problem that exists among my peers. This is a problem that could impact someone that I know, and that was just a reality of my life. But I think Palo Alto deals with that in a very strange way, so I understood it as just something that was true in the same way that you see a PSA on TV about, teen drunk driving. Palo Alto had teen suicides, and that was just something that was true.
The kids from Menlo Park and Palo Alto all got it. And kids from further away walked away and they're kind of like, this isn't part of my life.
My younger son goes to high school in a completely different district down in Morgan Hill. So when I do tell when I do go home and talk about these type of things with my family, it is very shocking to them because that is not the norm for where we live.
What's wrong? What happened? I get that a lot now. I don't know why they're suddenly so interested. Maybe I give off a vibe. Maybe they're just looking at me and thinking there's something wrong with me.
The way that I'm understanding the suicidal problems is that Palo Alto is a place where we have this very specific idea of what it means to be Palo Alton and what it means to have a Palo Alto identity and what it means to be sort of allowed to live here. And that's sort of this idea of this perfect person, this very well-educated person with a very good pedigree, who's very skilled at what they do, who is probably highly paid. There's a definite class aspect here. They are involved in Stanford. They're involved in the tech world. They're involved in one of these very elite institutions that is well known. It's the kind of thing where you say to somebody and they are impressed. That is a Palo Alton.
There are so many dimensions and it's so complex. Part of it's the fact that we have a train tracks going through, and others have used that as a means of taking their lives. If there were a simple cause, there'd be a simple solution. And the reason that the solutions are so evasive is because the causes are so complex.
Undeniably, there are a multitude of influences weighing in on the high number of suicides in Palo Alto. One source in particular has been at the forefront of many discussions regarding this problem: the outstanding yet abnormal emphasis on academics in Palo Alto.
So the suicides are definitely very complicated, and I obviously don't want to blame school for the suicides completely. There's lots of academic pressure in our school district.
In the past, community members had pointed fingers at the two overachieving high schools, Palo Alto High and Gun High.
Part of it's we're in a community of high achievement and high expectations, sometimes unreal expectations. I think at school we need to do our part to keep the homework load manageable, and again focus on learning and not just grades and GPA. Remember that we are teaching students and children. We're not teaching subjects, right? So we really need to think about developing the students' mental health and wellness as well as their academic abilities. To define success in terms of students' sense of purpose. So I think we are successful to the extent that students in high school have a sense of mission, a sense of purpose, and build their learning around that sense of purpose. And can demonstrate that through products they create, presentations they give, things they produce.
I started attending board meetings in January after the second suicide, and I gave a couple of speeches, and at first it wasn't really a big deal. I just gave 3-minute speeches about something that I was passionate about, and I don't even really remember how that started. I was among one of the first students to speak up after everything that happened, and the board saw that, and so I was contacted by multiple board members and by Dr. McGee, and they were very supportive and they wanted to help me get my voice heard even more.
Into my role as the student board representative, I was really hoping to be able to change a lot of things, but as a student board representative, you're kind of just there to talk about good news and good things at the schools. So yeah, there wasn't much room for me to really protest and say look, this is a huge problem in our district. And definitely there were opportunities where the school board members invited me to talk to them about things, but those were very rare occasions.
I really think that one speech can go such a long way. There's a lot of things that the board is just unaware of because they don't walk through these halls every day and they almost never come to campus unless there's a big event. And the students have a huge perspective that's really important just because there's 2,000 of us, and if we're not being heard, then the board will not have the perspective of one of the biggest stakeholder groups on campus. And it's really important that the students and the staff get heard.
The issue is more complicated than just the amount of schoolwork a student can handle.
This is a really complex situation that we have in Palo Alto, and a lot of parents are asking, or not just parents, community members are asking for a change in our academic policies and our academic culture to essentially reduce the risk of suicide of our students. And although it will help, it is not the cause of the problem.
The problem also comes from something outside of school and the city entirely, something much more complex and ineffable. This one source, found within every single student, is the teenage brain. Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, Dr. Shashank Joshi, addresses the psychological factors that contribute to depression among adolescents.
For a child or a teenager to become depressed, a number of things would have to come together. So having mood changes is part of a normal everyday life, particularly for teenagers. We experience ups and downs on a weekly basis, and usually teens are pretty good at bouncing back. You've learned a number of strategies throughout your life to deal with adversity, whether it's mild, moderate, or severe, and teenagers are remarkably resilient. But when you have a combination of severe stress and biological factors, and if you have a family history of mood problems or a diagnosed depression or bipolar disorder or severe anxiety, any of those factors in combination can lead to what we would call clinical depression.
Adolescence is a time when a lot of the factors that can lead to suicidal tendencies are just neurobiologically active. And that's not to say that it is a definite outcome of adolescence. It is to say that being an adolescent makes you more susceptible.
Sometimes when I wake up and open my eyes, I find myself immediately closing them. Like maybe if I close my eyes quick enough, I can undo waking up. It doesn't usually work, so I do the next best thing. I just pretend that I'm not awake for a long time. Not long enough though, because eventually you have to get out of bed. Why is there so much emphasis on tomorrow when the past is so heavy?
And if it goes untreated, this distress, if you will, can bring about some very problematic other issues that go along with it, including thinking about suicide and taking one's life. In most cases, a person who completes suicide has had a mental health condition that has been diagnosed, typically, in most cases, for at least a year. But in teenagers, those signs are often harder to detect, particularly in younger teens. The teen or the parent may not have known that, severe sleep problems or anger issues that are not getting better in the context of a sad mood may be a sign that there is depression going on. What teenagers need from grown-ups, from parents in particular, is they need parents to listen. They need parents to be able to listen non-judgmentally, especially when they're in times of stress. Perhaps they can come up with some solutions together.
Yeah, and be open. Listen. Listening, I would say, is the key word. Make your inquiries broad and just wait for an answer. Make it okay to talk about things and listen. Really listen. Don't try to give solutions. Don't try to reassure.
Despite the continuously increasing number of efforts being made to help make a difference, seeking assistance during times of distress is still widely viewed as taboo. Whether it's meeting with a therapist, relying on medication, or even seeking comfort from a friend.
We started getting calls the day it happened, just to let us know. And I mean, it's an awful occurrence regardless of who it is, but when you hear something like that and you know a lot of teenagers, you start to worry, like, is this someone I know? But I think we just had the realization that there was this incredibly heavy, important thing that most of the people who are going to come to our program that weekend were going to be thinking about. And I really believe firmly that if there is any place that should be a safe place to reflect upon and be given the opportunity to sort through and find some guidance and help through, the church should be that place. And so we do our best to put people into a community of people who will love them and care about them, who can be a safe group to be fully known, where you don't have to keep secrets, where you don't have to act perfect, where you don't have to pretend that everything's okay. Don't be afraid of the subject. I think we tend to, like, maybe you hear somebody's been on a 72-hour hold, and so you're like, I don't want to bring it up, I don't want to make them feel bad. And that is the opposite of what people actually need. To actually be bold in your question asking, to be outright and saying, giving people a place to talk it out. Like, there's shame around it. Like, people can feel embarrassed and shameful if word gets out that they are in treatment, that they have been put on a hold, that they are taking medicine to help stabilize their mood. Like, all of these things can have a stigma. And if we are afraid to talk to people about it, it reinforces that stigma. So I think it's super important to be willing to ask really pointed questions, like you care, you are interested, you are invested in their health and they're getting better.
The stigma exists both internally and externally for students. From the struggle to accept that they need help, to the difficulty actually finding the help that they need. The unspoken shame of opening up is what often leads to isolation and doubt in a crisis that no one should go through alone. Even as a community with varying perspectives, most people agree on one thing: the necessity to eliminate the stigma that has been built around mental health issues.
Well, I was diagnosed at 22, but prior to that, when I was going to school at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, I was struggling with symptoms of depression during my junior and senior year. So I wanted to become a pediatrician, and through my struggles with depression, I self-medicated a lot with alcohol and drugs. So my academics slipped, and I got kicked out of school.
I was in 6th grade. I was like 11 or 12 years old, so I was at home. I started to feel like my chest was hurting, like someone punched me in the chest. And I ignored it for a couple of minutes. I was like, it was normal, so I didn't even think about it. And then a couple of minutes passed, and my hands started to get clammy and sweaty, and I thought I was okay, so I just ignored it. She's like, no, let's take you to the ER. So we went, and they did exams, and they told me like how I was feeling. They said I was suffering an anxiety attack.
When I was hospitalized after being symptomatic in 2002, and I was officially diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I had trouble accepting the diagnosis. It was something that brought me a lot of shame. I'm a guy. I didn't want to ever be labeled as mentally ill because I thought that I wasn't going to be able to live a regular, normal, successful life. I wasn't going to have the, house with the white picket fence. I wouldn't be able to date anybody. Obviously, to become the pediatrician that I wanted to be.
With me getting depressed, I feel like the stereotypes are like, she's crazy, or maybe that medication made her crazy, or like, or she must take medications all day, or like every day. She wants to do this to herself. When she gets home, she's gonna cry. Maybe want to kill herself. Like, no, like, that's just wrong.
People think that those living with depression aren't as successful or aren't able to complete tasks, be as successful as someone without mental illness.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't say anything. It's a lot harder than they make it seem. They all say, talk to a trusted adult or friend, but there are no words for me to explain to another human being. If I can't even figure myself out, how on earth am I to expect anyone else to?
If you are suffering from a mental illness, that doesn't make you any less of a person or worse than anyone else. I think that a lot of times mental illness is stigmatized because it seems like there's something potentially wrong with that person's character or personality versus like for a physical illness.
I think a lot of people say ask for help, and that sounds a little bit cliche because when someone's having a hard time, it's hard to ask for help. But I think asking for help is important, whether it's going to your TA or going to a teacher you feel comfortable with or going to someone who can then help you ask for help.
Okay to talk about depression. There's still so much stigma attached to it. Yeah. People don't want to admit they're suffering from it. Nobody wants to talk about how you get treatment. Even in the workforce, it's okay to have the flu or break a leg, but don't tell anybody that you're struggling.
How can we even begin to solve something so complicated and deeply rooted in our community? Perhaps it's time for Palo Alto to follow the example of a neighboring town. One that has put a strong emphasis on effective communication between the youths who hold valuable perspectives and the adults who have power to carry out changes. If their city has proven one thing, it's that the power of change lies within the community.
Reach Ashland Youth Center was created by young people. They organized to make it happen, and it was really built in order to create more safety, belonging, and possibility in young people's lives and the lives of their community. So we have that as a part of our mission, and we both we integrate health and wellness, youth leadership, and social justice into all of our programs. Most of the young folks here, it's a large population of young people of color. Some of them many of them are immigrant populations, often coming from families that are working class. Suspects of young people who are up against adversity. Really the inspiration was these young folks who said that we want something better and we want something more. And we want more safety, we want more belonging, we want more possibilities. We were like, those aren't small things. And so what do we need to do as an organization to provide that to more young people? One of the things we think about is that when someone takes agency in their lives and feels empowered, that's actually like a perfect moment of health to me. And so we kind of strive to create that over and over. Helping young people, helping their communities to feel like they can self-determine so they can take action and make a difference.
The journey to recovery is a long and strenuous one, but Palo Alto is well on its way.
So let's first of all actually sit down and write out and define what we think the problem is. So instead of saying academic and social pressures, define that as Palo Alto students are under unique academic and social pressures to experience this model of perfection that is not possible, and writing that out and defining it. So that's the first step, and that really helps to crystallize in people's minds what they're talking about and to focus.
So I think rather than pointing the finger and going, this is a school problem, this is a parent problem, you darn kids need to, do something about it, that the idea is we're all in together, and so let's think of developing some solutions together and tap the extraordinary talent of this community.
The second step is to write out what are the specific indicators we have in mind when we think about this problem. So academic and social pressures, specifically students feel highly pressured to get into an Ivy League school. That's a specific indicator, and that can be specifically addressed. Once you do that, you say, okay, now why is this a problem? And then you come up with a couple of answers, and they say, okay, well, why is that a problem?
Is that we are in this together, and I'm here to listen. I know there's great ideas in the community. I hope you step forward and share them with me.
All of us need training about how to respond to issues like this. I think there are some teachers who don't feel comfortable sharing their feelings when something difficult comes up. Any training that we can get so that we can become better at facilitating that.
So, for example, one of our community members, when I was talking about the importance of means restriction, about what are we going to do about the train, she's a professional researcher for the Harvard Business School. She said, I'm going to research means restriction. And she developed this incredible research paper and PowerPoint presentation, which we took to Caltrain, which we took to the City Council. And so now they are making changes on Caltrain with fencing. They're going to have sensors. And it's really because this individual, something we had said at a meeting inspired her to take action.
AIDS has now been sort of downgraded from a fatal diagnosis to a chronic condition. And we can do that with suicides.
And billions of funding, if not trillions of funding in the area of cancer research. We know more, but there's so much we don't know, and we have not even begun in the area of mental health to invest that amount of energy and effort. I just think it's the new frontier.
There's this party coming up. I don't even know if I should go. Friends are telling me that I should get out of the house and that it could help get my mind off things. Maybe they're right. But then again, what would they know about how I'm feeling? I've hidden myself, numb to the world around me, but to know that others could feel the same way, to know that every person is fighting some unknown battle, I can't hide anymore. If there's the slightest possibility that I'm not the only person suffering right now, then there's a chance. There's a gleam of hope in the distance.
Palo Alto is well on its way, and perhaps it is because of one particular factor that has persisted throughout this crisis: hope.
Trying to prepare my words and think really carefully through what I would say, and then stand up and I began to speak, and I began to speak to kids that I'd known for 6 years.
Sometimes you don't realize what you need until you finally have it. Intangible emptiness inside of you, but you don't know it's there until something fills that void, and only then you can think back and realize how empty you felt. So she did something.
I prayed for a couple of people, and people were starting to clear out, and so I was just kind of scanning the room. And on the other side of the room, I saw this girl who was gone for 8 months.
That's exactly what I needed. I've made it through. The worst is behind me, and the recovery is in front of me. My closest friends are proud.
During that time, we were writing letters back and forth because she wasn't allowed to talk on the phone. And I thought to myself, I was really in this dark, this really sad night. It was this glimmer of hope. The night she told her parents had gotten on a bike and ridden to the train station, but it started to rain. And it rained, and so she came home. That's what kept her alive. And they got her the help that she needed. And she's back. and she's doing well. This reminder that it can get better, that healing does come, that hope is real, it's not an illusion.
Hope is resilience.
Even when everything seems to go wrong and it seems like there's nothing we can do, I've seen people just refuse to give up. It's really representative of our resilience.
Hope is when you're able to see how you can get from where you are to where you want to be.
Hope is telling yourself things will get better.
To know that it gets better.
Well, so there's a quote by Martin Luther King: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." I have hope that even when it looks difficult, that the arc leads toward hope.
With so many complexities involved in this issue, it's hard to know where to begin. At times, it seems as though we may never truly find the solution.
We can. We can get there. Because that was the last chapter, and now it's time to move to the next. The pen is in the hands of the author, the community, us. Sometimes it's easy to gain tunnel vision on certain goals or experiences. Impulses are hard to avoid, and sometimes you do need others to help you step back to see what's really in front of you. And how blind I was, but now can see. Our future is unwritten. The page is blank and the ink is wet. It is up to us to write, to move forward, and to decide where we go from here. Unmasked.